Hi, everyone, and welcome. My name is Nicholas Bulens. I am a program administrator at the Executive Office of Economic Development. And in this video, I'll be presenting on the fiscal year 25 annual grant round of the Massachusetts Dredging Program. This is a pre-recorded info session, so thank you for tuning in and for your interest in the program. The purpose of this video is to provide a walkthrough of the current round's RFP. I'll go over the agenda in just a moment, but I have two quick housekeeping items. First, a copy of this slide deck is available on Combis. Please feel welcome to download it at any time. Second, because this is not a live recording, there's no Q&A portion to the presentation. However, the round has an open Q&A period during which any person can submit written questions. Responses will be publicly posted on Combis following the close of the Q&A period. I'll provide more details on the logistics for this at the end of the presentation. So let's dive in. Here's our agenda for today's video. We'll start with an overview of the round, its background, goals, general ABCs, and a bit of what's new in fiscal year 25. Next, we'll talk about core requirements, followed by a walkthrough of the application process. We'll discuss the review process as well as the criteria used to evaluate applications. Then I'll offer some helpful tips for applying and detail the written Q&A process. Lastly, I'll say a few words about the Seaport Economic Council Grant Program, which is a great resource for coastal municipalities, especially those who are still in the study or design phase of their dredging projects. Now, a quick disclaimer, this presentation is not a substitute for reading the RFP. We'll cover the highlights of the fiscal year 25 round, but we won't cover every nook and cranny. So for full details, please consult the RFP. The Mass Dredging Program is a standalone capital grant program launched in 2019. It is the first and still the only grant program in the Commonwealth to offer focused funding for saltwater dredging. It also offers this funding on an open, predictable, and competitive basis. The overarching goal of the program is to respond to local dredging needs that strengthen the Commonwealth's blue economy. Blue economy is partly a term of art, but for our purposes, we take a broad view of the topic. We define the blue economy as encompassing not just ocean-based commercial activities such as fisheries and transportation, but quality of life activities like coastal recreation and tourism, as well as what communities need to make these activities possible, namely safe and healthy harbors. These are the basics: who, what, and how of the round. Who and what are eligible. The program offers construction grants to coastal municipalities for saltwater dredging. By construction, we mean the actual dredging of a site, the disposal of dredged material, and other general construction tasks associated with public dredging projects. How will awards be made? Grants will be competitively awarded with a focus on shovel-ready projects that contribute to the economic vitality, vibrant waterfronts, maritime safety, or ecosystem health of Massachusetts harbors. All Massachusetts coastal municipalities are eligible to apply, although there is a limit of one application per municipality. Projects for all types of saltwater dredging and disposal methods will be considered, including what we refer to as Federal Section 204 beneficial use projects. Only public tidelands are eligible for funding. This means that the dredging site cannot be privately owned, whether that ownership is by grant, lease, or license. In these cases, the site is considered privately held tidelands, and so the area is ineligible for public funding. The maximum amount that may be requested is $2.5 million per municipality. Joint applications, of course, have two municipalities, which means the total requested amount can exceed $2.5 million, provided this amount is justified by the project cost and supported by a 50% match. Overall, the program focuses on shovel-ready projects that provide benefits in one or more of the following subsectors of the blue economy, which were already kind of mentioned in the other slides: economic vitality, vibrant waterfronts, maritime safety, and ecosystem health. There are quite a few things that are new for fiscal year 25. The biggest change is the maximum contract period that EOED will consider. In this round, contracts for 2 fiscal years will be considered for large-scale projects. I'll go over what I mean by large-scale projects in another couple of slides. But another change is an expansion of the evaluation criteria this round. When reviewers assess applications, we'll now consider community-wide classification, designation, and the adoption of economic development tools. So these factors were incorporated into the round because they align with one or more initiatives of the Commonwealth's new economic development plan. Lastly, for this slide, we've made significant updates to the application section 5 and 6, which deal with the subsectors of the blue economy and the municipality's preparedness for success. To name a few of these updates, we've added questions related to boat ramp types, parking, and fees. We've added questions about recent and imminent local investments in public safety vessels. Additionally, we've added questions regarding a municipality's existing stormwater bylaws and whether these conform with statewide regulations. Now, another disclaimer, these are not the only differences between the current and previous grant rounds. For this reason, we recommend that you consult the What's New attachment on Combis. That document goes into more details about differences, but it is not a substitute for reading the RFP and application in full. Each year, I like to provide a snapshot of the program's impact. Since 2019, the program has funded 36 public projects. We've awarded over 25 million in grants, tapping into more than 31 million in local contributions. Projects have removed roughly 664,000 cubic yards of material. Nearly half of that material was used to rebuild public beaches and shorelines. To give you a sense of the magnitude of these numbers, 664,000 cubic yards is roughly equivalent to the volume of 201 Olympic swimming pools. Lastly, the program has sustained and strengthened harbors that collectively support 1,000 plus commercial vessels, more than 8,000 moorings and dockage slips, and over 70 harbor-dependent businesses such as boatyards and commercial marinas. Per the program's authorizing legislation, projects require a one-to-one cost share or a 50% match to be considered for funding. This match must consist of non-state funds, but those funds may come from multiple non-state sources, such as municipal bonds, federal grants, or private contributions. Very important, in-kind contributions and pre-grant contract costs are not eligible as matching funds. The applicant's match must be a cash equivalent comprised of non-state dollars. The contract performance period. EOED expects that most, if not all, grants will be awarded for one fiscal year with a contract ending date of June 30, 2025. However, as noted earlier, contracts for 2 fiscal years will be considered for large-scale projects. And for this round, large scale means that the municipality can demonstrate the following: that the project cannot feasibly be completed in a single fiscal year due to the anticipated volume of dredge material and time of year restrictions required by regulatory agencies. And secondly, that as a result of these factors, the project requires the grantee to bid and award a 2 fiscal year general dredging contract to ensure uninterrupted construction and completion of the project. Allowable costs. In the RFP, allowable costs are covered in detail, but for the purposes of this presentation, these are the broad strokes. Allowable costs will generally include bidding, construction, and construction administration services deemed necessary, appropriate, and reasonable for completion of the project. EOED may choose to make awards only for selected costs. EOED may choose to make awards for less than an applicant's requested amount. Sometimes these are referred to as partial awards. In terms of what's non-allowable, meaning what you cannot use grant funds on, these include pre-construction costs or costs associated with study, design, engineering, permitting, or real property transactions, and purchases of dredging equipment. Now, I will note that the program's authorizing legislation does allow for the awarding of funds for purchases of regional dredging equipment. However, these projects require very different evaluations, and so regional equipment grants are offered in separate rounds as funding allows. As a result, speaking for just this round, purchases of dredging equipment are not eligible for funding. The anticipated start date for contracts awarded in the fiscal year 25 round is July 1st. Grantees will be required to submit all permits and drawings as part of the award, either before or after contracting at UED's discretion. UED may place conditions on any award commitment and require that those conditions be satisfied before we contract. All contracts will incorporate the terms and conditions of the RFP, any amendments to thereto, and the grant's commitment letter and any conditions therein. Lastly, for this slide, UED may hold a minimum 5% of any award as retainage until the project is complete. The deadline, applications must be submitted by April 19th, 11:59 p.m. Applications must be submitted online via UED's submittable platform. So this is a grant management platform with a login. No late submissions will be accepted, no email, paper, or fax submissions. For preparation, municipalities can preview and download a copy of the application in Microsoft Word format that's available on Combis. We highly recommend that you consult it, but this copy is offered as a reference and preparation resource only. No submission of a Word document will be accepted as a formal application. The application is divided into 6 substantive sections. The project snapshot, this is exactly what it sounds like, a quick snapshot of what's being requested. Harbor and community profiles, here you describe the characteristics requested for both the harbor and the community at large. Project profile, this section deals with the project site, tasks, timeline, and its shovel readiness. Cost and funding sources. This is mostly a cost summary table, but it also covers your match commitment and any pre-construction spending. Promoting the blue economy. This is your largest and most substantive section. It's comprised of 4 subsections, each of which corresponds to one of the 4 areas of blue economy that we mentioned previously. For purposes of evaluations, each subsection is equally weighted, which means no subsector of the blue economy has an inherent edge over any other. Lastly, preparing for success. This section deals first with the capabilities of the municipality to maintain the outcomes of the project, and second, it considers any imminent public or private capital improvements that may be coinciding with the project. 2 types of attachments, those required for all projects and those that are conditional. All applicants must submit a site plan. All applicants must submit copies of any permits issued to date, including associated plan and drawings. However, there is a waiver for past applicants who submitted permits in a prior grant round. In these cases, you are not required to resubmit, provided that none of your previously submitted permits have expired and no modifications have been issued. If that is not the case, then the municipality does have to submit its renewed and modified permits, including their associated plans and drawings. If you're submitting a joint application, you'll need to include a signed statement from the CEO of the partnering municipality. Additionally, if you're requesting funds for a federal Section 204 beneficial use project, you'll need to submit either the project's feasibility or federal interest determination report, which should be prepared by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. And finally, commercial partner letters. So if your project coincides with either piggyback dredging or capital improvements to a commercial waterfront property, then you'll need to provide a commitment letter from that property owner. This letter needs to include all the information outlined in the RFP and in the application. All projects must be submitted using UED's submittable platform, which again is a 100% online application process with a login. First thing to note is that each submitter or the person entering the application needs to create a personal user account. This slide provides some screenshots of the process. You'll find the submittable link on the Dredging Program's How to Apply page. From there, look for the Submit button next to the fiscal year annual grant round. You'll be prompted to sign in. If you're a new user, click Sign Up. And if you forgot your password, you can click Forgot and follow the on-screen instructions. Once signed in, you'll be asked a quick yes or no pre-check question just to confirm that you're applying for dredging construction. Once you're past the pre-check, you will have officially started your application and you can save and return at any time. Here are the high-level steps for submitting an application. I'm not going to read each of them, but I will call out steps 5 and 6. When preparing to upload your attachments, we recommend that you save them in a common folder on your computer. And most importantly, you should label each file using the file naming system in the RFP. As you can imagine, the review panel will have lots of attachments to open, and it's extremely helpful for your project's review if attachments can be identified easily and quickly. A few notes about the mechanics of the online application. Some questions are conditional. They'll appear only if you select yes, no, or some specific answer. So read and consider your responses carefully. Additionally, watch for options that say select all that apply. Those selections definitely matter. Throughout the application, you'll see icons that call out important details and guidance about what to include in your responses. Read these very carefully as well. You'll also encounter several tables. All of these will auto-calculate as necessary. Lastly, most text boxes allow rich text editing, which means bullet points and other functions are available. Feel welcome to use them. Also, most text boxes will automatically expand so you can see all your text at once. Award decisions. Applications will be evaluated based on the criteria and conditions specified in the RFP. The review panel will prepare a list of recommended awards subject to secretary approval and ratification by the governor and lieutenant governor. EOED anticipates emailing decision notifications by mid-June. Any award will be contingent on the successful execution of a grant contract. And this contract, again, will incorporate all conditions of the RFP, the grantee's commitment letter, as well as any conditions therein. Now I'll walk through the evaluation criteria for the round. Very important, this presentation covers most, but not necessarily all evaluation criteria. So please consult the RFP for full details. Additionally, please note that these are evaluation criteria, not eligibility criteria. In other words, these are factors that the review panel will assess and weigh as part of the competitive evaluation process, but applicants are not required to meet these criteria to be eligible for consideration. The first set of criteria on the screen applies to Section 2 of the application. The review panel will consider the following: whether the municipality qualifies as a rural or small town, or whether the project is located in a housing choice community, whether the application is an environmental justice community, also known as an EJ community, and whether the project is located within an EJ census block group, sometimes referred to as an EJ neighborhood. We'll consider the variety of EJ populations in the community, as well as what percentage of your population resides within EJ census block groups. We'll consider your municipality's EQV per capita. So this number is calculated by Mass DOR. It basically represents your community's total real estate property value divided by its population. Also, we'll consider the municipality's use of select smart growth strategies or state-approved economic development tools. Lastly, for this slide, we'll consider whether the municipality has achieved compliance with the Commonwealth's multifamily zoning requirements for MBTA communities, if that is applicable. Now, the criteria discussed in the previous slide dealt with characteristics at the community-wide level. This slide deals with characteristics specific to Project Harbor. Both of these characteristics are covered in Section 2 of the application. Generally speaking, when it comes to the harbor, what we're measuring here is how much or to what extent the harbor operates as a community and economic resource for the municipality. So for these purposes, the review panel will consider the following: whether the project is located in a designated port area, whether existing facilities and infrastructure are consistent with a developed harbor, By facilities and infrastructure, what we mean are physical assets in the harbor, such as boat ramps, piers, mooring and dockage slips, but also commercial marinas and commercial boat yards, etc. The review panel will also consider existing land uses and destinations at or adjacent to the harbor. Um, and these land uses and destinations that we're looking for would be consistent with an active public waterfront. So examples of these would include beaches, parks, boat rentals, fishing shops, restaurants and retails, overnight accommodations, etc. Lastly, for this slide, the review panel will consider the proximity and direct access to the harbor for environmental justice populations. Project profile, the review panel will consider the number of fiscal years since the site was last dredged, the clarity, completeness of the project scope, as well as any need for phasing of the project if applicable. We'll also consider the strength of the project need based on existing conditions in the harbor and their impact on users and resources. Lastly, for this slide, we'll consider the project shovel readiness, and that will be based on whether the following conditions exist or are imminent. The project design is advanced and fully funded. All permits and ownership of the site are secured. All match funds are secured. And lastly, the project schedule is feasible and can realistically be completed in the contract performance period. Cost and funding sources. The review panel will consider the clarity and completeness of the project's cost summary. We'll consider whether the municipality's match is secured or imminent and whether the amount of that match exceeds the 50% requirement. We'll consider whether the project builds on a dredging design grant previously awarded by the Seaport Economic Council. We'll also consider whether the municipality incurred 50,000 or more in pre-construction costs over the last 3 fiscal years, including the current fiscal year. Lastly, for this slide, the review panel will consider if and when the municipality last received a dredging grants from the mass dredging program. So as previously noted, Section 5 of the application is your largest and most substantive. It deals with benefits across the 4 subsectors of the blue economy. So there are 2 things to note here. First, for purposes of evaluation, each subsector is equally weighted, which means no focus area has an inherent edge over any other. Second, while projects that are strong in multiple subsectors will generally be more competitive, projects are not required to excel in all or any minimum number. The program has funded projects in every subsector that you see here. For commercial fishing and boating, the review panel will consider the following: the strength of the project's existing commercial fishing, lobstering, or shellfishing based on its magnitude and variety, whether the harbor hosts public offloading facilities for commercial catch, the strength of commercial boating in the harbor based on the number and variety of vessels, and lastly, for this slide, the strength of improvements or sustained benefits for commercial users and activity. For recreational boating and destinations, the review panel will consider whether the harbor supports a region-wide boating public. So this assessment is based on the capacity of the water body's launch facilities, parking accommodations, and fees associated with parking. The review panel will consider whether the project coincides with the expansion of moorings or dockage slips. And that expansion, what we're looking for is, will it happen within 1 fiscal year of the dredging? Lastly, for this slide, the review panel will consider the project's support for an active public waterfront. This assessment is based on the magnitude and variety of recreational, community, and commercial destinations at or adjacent to the harbor. So to assist with your response, the application provides a wide variety of example destinations. So you can find a list of those in the application. Maritime safety. As previously mentioned, this subsection includes several changes, so be sure to read these questions early. For this subsection, the review panel will consider the following: the level of risk to boating safety based on the number and frequency of groundings, support for public safety vessels based on the number and variety that regularly operate in the harbor, purchases of public safety vessels by the municipality in the last 5 fiscal years, whether the project coincides with imminent purchases of public safety vessels or equipment for these vessels. So examples of equipment purchases could include outboard engines, side sonar imaging, and thermal imaging, things like that. Lastly, for this slide, the strength of the improvements or sustained benefits for emergency responder capabilities or speed. The last subsector is ecosystem services and health. Here, the review panel will consider the following: whether the project includes the beneficial use of dredge material and the strength of improvements for ecosystem services benefits, or ESBs. Now, ESBs are defined as benefits provided to the community through protection or restoration of its natural coastal ecosystems. So these natural coastal ecosystems are things like eelgrass, salt marshes, shellfish beds, nesting habitats, beach dunes, barrier islands, things like that. And what you'll see in the application is you'll be giving a list of common ecosystem services. And from this, you'll select all that apply to the project and then provide an explanation on how they apply. The review panel will also consider whether the harbor or an adjacent water body is listed as an impaired water by Mass DEP. Lastly, for this slide, the review panel will consider whether the municipality has a comprehensive stormwater bylaw or a set of bylaws that meet the EPA and Mass DEP's stormwater management requirement. So this is a question that you might have to ask your legal counsel, maybe a planner or conservation agent, someone in your municipality, so make sure you do that early. The last section is known as preparing for success. Here, the review panel will consider the following: the project's anticipated lifespan based on how long before maintenance dredging will be required, the strength of the municipality's local capabilities to maintain the outcomes of the project. So this assessment is based on any comprehensive permitting, planning documents, select revenue sources, recent fee increases, and whether the community has a community preservation fund. Lastly, for this slide, the review panel will consider whether the project coincides with imminent investments. And we're looking for investments in any of the following: improvements to public buildings, infrastructure, or open space that are at or adjacent to the harbor, piggyback dredging, and we define this as dredging undertaken by a commercial property owner in coordination with the same dredging contractor as the municipality, and capital improvements at commercial waterfront properties. So to assist with your responses, the application provides several lists and a variety of examples for all these improvements. So again, check that out in the application first to give yourself ideas and understandings. Helpful tips. Every round, I like to offer tips that can help maximize the competitiveness of your application. First, complete all sections to the extent applicable. We just can't evaluate what you don't answer. Respond completely to each question. Sometimes it can feel that you're repeating information, but that's okay if doing so is what's needed to answer that question completely. To that end, be sure to read all questions carefully and look for guidance about what to include in your response. We are very careful in how we direct you to do that so you can provide the best possible responses and maximize your competitiveness. Lastly, not all statements speak for themselves. So when asked or when feasible, support any statements with examples, numbers, or information from professional reports that you may already have. In previous grant rounds, applicants were asked us where they could find data and information on the blue economy. This was a really great question, and our sister secretariats have published a variety of reports on the blue economy. So to assist, the RFP provides links to as many of these resources as I could find. They include harbor maps, fisheries and aquaculture, coast guides, tourism, and more. Several of these resources are linked here in the slide. These links and others can be found in the RFP. All data and information resources are offered for reference purposes. Consulting them is not a requirement or an evaluation criteria for this round. They were compiled in response to requests from applicants, and they are meant to assist applicants. So if desired, you can use them either to generate ideas, informing your narratives, or just generally preparing your application. All right, the written Q&A process. General questions regarding the RFP will be accepted via electronic mail, so email, through March 22nd, 11:59 p.m. Send the questions to eohedgrants@mass.gov using the subject line dredging RFP. So I will note that this is an older email. We're working on changing it, but EOHED, so it still has the H in it. Be aware of that. EOED will respond only to general questions that reserved, and we reserve the right not to respond to any or all questions. Similar questions may be aggregated and answered via a single response. Formal responses will be posted on Combis. And also technical support will be available up to 5 p.m. on the application due date. After 5 p.m., no, just be aware, no one will be monitoring the email, so you'll be on your own. Lastly, I want to say a few words on the Seaport Economic Council grant program. This is a really great resource for coastal communities, which I encourage you to research if you haven't already. The SEC offers multi-year grants to coastal municipalities for a really wide range of projects, including economic development planning and coastal infrastructure. SEC grants are offered only to coastal municipalities. The match is 20%, which is actually quite low compared to most grant programs. Additionally, the max award is 1 million, which is quite high for a grant program. Most importantly, eligible projects include study, design, and permitting of future dredging. This means that if you're not ready to apply for construction to the mass dredging program, the SEC could be a source of funding to help you prepare for that in the future. Similarly, the SEC supports development of municipal harbor plans. These plans can be a powerful resource when you're preparing a mass dredging application. So among other things, these plans generate a lot of the same information that we ask about in our dredging. They're also one way of incorporating dredging into a local state-approved planning document, which is again something that we ask about and look for. Lastly, for this slide, SEC grants support design and construction of public buildings and infrastructure along your harbor. If you recall, one of our evaluation criteria is whether a dredging project coincides with other public investments. Here's a potential source of funding to help plan for these types of investment. With all that said, we are at the end of our presentation. Thank you again for tuning in, and we look forward to reading this year's applications.